I see more people are still joining in right now. We will begin approximately about 5 minutes. All right, hello everyone. Hope everyone is having a great Sunday. Welcome to Ellal with EDN. With our virtual spotlight, we have Mikal Woldu and Semere. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Rahwa Mehari, and I am on the leadership team with Eritrean Diaspora Network. And for those of you that may be new to the Eritrean Diaspora Network, we are a community organization dedicated to professional development and advancement for the Eritrean diaspora through nonpartisan community programming. And we have professional development network, and our primary objective is really to promote the spirit of the Eritrean networking and cooperation with the Eritrean diaspora, and to help foster the individual and collective successes by providing networking opportunities, supporting development of Eritreans within their given career, and enhancing awareness of professional accomplishments. So within both the Eritrean and the broader community as a whole. And so to this date, we have highlighted and featured over 59 Eritreans with wide variety of careers. So we are really excited about that. Of course, before we begin, just brief housekeeping items. Please keep in mind the mission of the organization and to really respect the space. There will be opportunities to ask questions at the end. So if you would like to, just message us, whether you want to do it audio or video, and we would love to have you participate in the discussion. And also, if you are enjoying this and you take a picture or video and we want you to share it on social media, please tag at EriDiaspora and also at EriWellBeing. And so let's keep this fun and engaging. And so to start off, let's go ahead and introduce our guests, Mikal, Woldu, and Ruth Semere. And as we begin, if you will, just kind of share with us your career, exciting career and educational background, and also how you came about starting EriWellBeing. So the floor is all yours.
Who's going first, Ruthie? I go
first.
So hi everyone, I'm Mikal, one half of EriWellBeing. I was born and raised in Italy. I'm currently based in London, and that's where Ruthie and I met more than a decade ago. So we've been friends for a really long time. And so my background is mostly between academic and community work, I would say. So academically, I just completed my PhD in anthropology, where I looked at the experiences of Eritrean migrant communities in London and Milan. So I was looking at how migrant communities are shaped by the society in which they live in. So I compared how different migration policies have affected the settlement of different cohorts of our communities. So the older generation, our generation, you know, the young asylum seekers, and so on. And well, yeah, and one half of EriWellBeing, which Ruthie and I started organically about 2 years ago. I will tell you a little bit about it, and then I will leave the rest to Ruthie later. But basically, we decided to, so initially we didn't have in mind to have a platform as such to talk about mental health. What we had in mind was to launch a campaign to raise awareness around mental health within our community. At the time, there were a number of suicides that were happening, not only in Europe, but across the world, and it was affecting mostly young people. And we really felt the urge to kind of raise awareness, because obviously silence was killing so many of our loved ones. And so with the help of the page Eritrea's on My Heart, and with the support of Dr. Jakob Tekje, we launched on this campaign. But then we received such a positive and encouraging feedback from people really wanting to talk about mental health. So we decided that it needed a separate space, that a space needed to be created where we could have this conversation, where it wasn't just a one-off, but we would be able to share our experiences and, you know, talk about mental health. I'll leave the rest to Ruthie.
Well, you said like the most important parts, but yeah, so I'm Ruthie, and since we're all Eritreans here, my name is Ruta. So I was born and raised in Sweden, in Stockholm. My academic background is I studied international business and management. So I moved to London for my postgrad, and that's where I met Mikal many, many years ago. Like she said, we've been friends for over a decade. And I came out of that degree, it was a very broad degree in like business and marketing and management. And I got my first job in the media industry, in media planning. And then that was my first taste of kind of like working in the media industry, fell in love with that. And I've just since then built a career in international media, specifically digital media marketing, advertising, content creation for larger brands, really. Some of the brands that I've worked for are Discovery Communications, NBC Universal, National Geographic, so on the kind of broadcast TV, traditional TV side, but I've always worked with their digital products. And a couple of years ago, I decided to move back to Stockholm, to my hometown, and I thought it was a great opportunity to do something I wanted to do for a long time, which was to train to become a professional coach, a life coach. So I'm also a trained coach, and I am currently building my own business within personal development, self-development, and I'm really passionate about partnering with people on their growth journeys. And I think that kind of naturally intersects with the work that Mikal and I do with EriWellBeing. And like Mikal said, it was very spontaneous. It came out of a mutual interest that we have in community. Also like just seeing the pain in our community and the silence, really, that there was at that period, there was so many things that we were hearing about, like Mikal said, suicides and so on, but nobody was really talking about it. So our initial intention was just to have a conversation. And we were just like, okay, who can we partner with? And like Mikal said, Dr. Jakob, Eritrea's on my heart. And then since it's just like grown, and our intention really for EriWellBeing is to raise awareness. We are community builders. We're not mental health professionals, but we feel that we have the capacity to hold space for the conversation. And we do that through some of our posts, like our content on Instagram. We also have a podcast where we invite people in from the community, either experts or just people who have personal experiences with their mental health. And then Mikal and I will also jump on the podcast sometimes just to talk about certain topics. Like the last one we talked about was, this group think that we have in Eritrea and Ethiopia, in a lot of immigrant cultures, like what will people say? That we are constantly so worried about what other people will think about us and how that impacts like our choices and how we move and shake in the world, and maybe limit ourselves. So it's really kind of like talking about mental health from like the clinical perspective with the experts, but also everything around it that impacts mental health. And I guess the main thing around that is that EriWellBeing, we're not like experts. We're really like shoulder to shoulder with everybody in the community and just like engaging in conversation. And our goal is that nobody should feel alone on their mental health journeys. Nobody should feel othered, or that it's not okay for them to talk about whatever they're going through in terms of their mental health. And I guess maybe I just want to add one more thing that is interesting for both me and Mikal. We've studied, Mikal is a doctor, so she's a doctor now. Like I have like my degrees, but it's interesting how about like, let's say, give or take 10 years in, it's like we have this second wave of new interests coming in where we can like build on what we have created like initially. And that's so interesting in terms of professional development, is it doesn't have to be one thing. You can start somewhere and that can take you somewhere else as well. So I think we're sort of in that space, finding our feet. We can't hear you.
All right. Thank you so much. I think you two, as a Eritrean professional women, came together to really create a much needed space. And like you mentioned, you invited the experts, and I think creating the space is all that we need right now. And you did just that, because it's a hard conversation, especially not only the Black community, but in the Eritrean community. So thank you all for starting this platform, a much needed, and I am excited to see how far it's going to go, because the conversation, especially with the world, what's going on right now, a lot of us are quiet about it, but with you two having that discussion and allowing experts to come in and teach us and show us how to take care of ourselves better, it's definitely going to go a long way. And that conversation piece is going to just heal a lot of air trends. So thank you for that. Um, and so today, of course, our discussion is about burnout and boundaries. And so to begin our topic of discussion, research has shown over 75% of workers are experiencing burnouts, right? And 40% of those polled have mentioned that it says because of the result of the pandemic, right? And that's pretty high number and it's scary seeing how long this pandemic has lasted. So will you share about like the burnout in the workplace and what that looks like and how can we identify it?
Shall I start on that one, Vicky?
Yes.
And I guess, like, I just want to highlight that I'm going to be speaking about this from my personal experience, because again, I'm not a mental health professional. So I have experienced burnout pretty severe a couple of years ago. It was about 4 years ago. And it was while I was working in the corporate world in a pretty high level job. And there's a lot of pressure. It was a good job. I just want to give the details. So for the people who are listening, that might paint the picture. It was a good job. It was actually a great job. I had a great boss, and you know, there was nothing necessarily wrong with the job. But living in London, which I guess is like living in New York or one of those like big hectic cities, I had been working at this like fast pace for a very long time. And then out of nowhere, I think it was November, December 2015, I just didn't feel like myself anymore. And some of the symptoms, just to share, it might be helpful for people listening, is that all of a sudden, I'm a pretty energetic, life-loving person. I lost that like life energy. I didn't feel like doing anything anymore. Food was like, I didn't even want to eat food anymore. That wasn't even interesting to me. Like I couldn't enjoy and partake in pleasure. I didn't really want to hang out with people. I became more an introvert. I would hide and avoid social interaction with family and friends. And, you know, I would feel agitated. I wasn't like sleeping very well. And I think all of that really was wrapped around with this one feeling of like, I felt like really hopeless and frustrated, but I couldn't figure out what it was. I was like, I have my apartment, I'm healthy, I have my family, I have support. Like I have this great job, but I was just like really not happy. And I think because I feel like burnout in my experience is a mix of the physical and also the mental. So usually you experience it both ways for most people. And I experienced all of these symptoms, some of them, and definitely a lot more, but all of these symptoms. And then I also experienced like extreme like fatigue. I was just like extremely tired. And at that time I had my Eritrean pride up very high. I was just like, my parents fled war. Like I have no excuse for whatever it is that I'm feeling right now. So I didn't tell anybody. So this period was for about 4 months, and I didn't tell anybody. So I did the bare minimum. I'd go to work and come home. And after that, I literally would come home and wrap myself in this gabi I had and lay on the sofa and just like recuperate and gain enough energy to be able to go back to work the next day, or pick up the phone call from my mom and just be like, dahania, you know, like I was just keeping it. Like I was on a maintenance level for a really long time. And at that time, I wasn't open about mental health. I had always been interested in these topics, but almost from a voyeuristic perspective. It wasn't like, it was like something that like white people experienced or other people experienced. Like I was interested, but I could never like really apply those concepts to myself. So those 4 months, I think intuitively, my body just knew that I needed to down regulate. So that's what I did. Like I just slept and I did the bare minimum, but I kind of went through the winter months. And when spring came, I started feeling better again, slowly started going to the gym and so on, and educated myself on what all these symptoms were. And then I could be like, and then I was like, oh, it was burnout. Oh, it was like, you know, you had anxiety. That was the depression. And I started educating myself. But I think to go back to your question, that's just like the context. To go back to your question is like, if we say that 75% of people will experience or have experienced some type of like burnout, right? For me, it wasn't actually about what was happening in the workplace. It was a lot of emotional baggage from the past that I hadn't dealt with, a lot of expectations, a lot of my people pleasing, a lot of like cultural expectations. and me not playing like the primary role in my own life. And all of that just came to a head at that period. So I realized it wasn't actually the job. It was just like, that was the moment that I was in. But it took a lot of work for me to unpack that. So it's like therapy, coaching, and so on. So I actually heard this on Brene Brown's latest podcast episode. I listened to it this morning, and she said it really well. So I feel like burnout is like, happens when we experience a feeling, but we're not allowing ourselves to feel the feeling. So you're not coming to a completion with the feeling. So I had all these feelings that were like rumbling around within me, but I didn't allow myself to feel them. I didn't allow myself to like actually like process them. I would feel them, and then it would go back into a loop. And I think that exhausted me so much that I eventually hit the wall. And if we apply that to the general population or general public, I think a lot of us are walking around with emotions and feelings and traumas and baggage that is like unprocessed. And that can definitely lead to, or, you know, there's a correlation, I think, between that and that high number of burnout. And then you add a pandemic to that. People are working from home. You know, you don't get a break, you don't get to shift environments, you know, you might have to spend time at home with your spouse. You never spent that much time with your spouse before, your parents or your flatmates or whatever it is, or just managing uncertainty. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. The election is impending. Like, we don't know what 2021 is going to look like. Like, there's just like so many things, restrictions. So I think we can also, you know, end up with burnout from like overthinking and like mentally trying to manage uncertainty without the right tools, if that makes sense. But generally, I really feel like intuitively this whole notion of like burnout and the connection between how unprocessed feelings and emotions is very strong. So that's kind of how I feel, how I make sense of those high numbers.
I mean, there is so very little to add to everything that you just said. But I think some of the points, again, like Ruthie said, I can only speak from my experience as a non-mental health professional. But all kind of the symptoms that Ruthie spoke about, I can clearly identify them during my PhD, but particularly during the last year of PhD. And just the lack of energy, but the lack of, I'm also somebody who's generally quite vibrant and love food. I love to socialize and all of those things. But I was almost going into trying to preserve my energy as much as possible just to get to the end goal, which is to submit my thesis. Now, my situation was different in the sense that during my academic studies, I didn't have a very supportive supervisor during my PhD. So as the first one in my family to go to university, so already like as an undergraduate, but also as a postgraduate, and obviously I didn't know anyone doing a PhD before I started a PhD. In my life, in my extended, forget about the family, like even in my friendship and networks, I didn't know what a PhD was. I didn't know what the completing a PhD would entail. Had I known that before, I would have chosen my supervisor more wisely, because the PhD is such a lonely journey. And I don't know if others, like in other careers, can identify with this process, but it's just the whole point of not having a team, not having colleagues to speak to, not being able to ask for advice, to mentors. So to the loneliness that I felt through my academic journey, and then life. So, and somebody who didn't have a scholarship for my studies, I also had to work at least one part-time job at the time. And I say part-time, it was almost a full-time job. There were times where I had to gain the practice of teaching, and I was carrying two jobs. I was teaching and my other part-time job, because the other part-time job was a permanent job that I couldn't let go. So on one side is what Ruthie mentioned about, unprocessed emotions. And then on the other hand, also the overthinking, the uncertainty that counts, for example, for financial uncertainty. So I can't leave this job because I need to pay for my bills. And this is a very real concern. And even though you're studying, but this, again, coming from the context of my parents fled war, or all the sacrifice that our parents have done for us to raise us, I can't ask for help to my parents. They're already paying the fees, right? I can't vocalize that I'm struggling to my family. So who do you vocalize it to? And that, well, similar to what Ruthie said, it took a while for me to realize that, you can't help everybody and not being able to receive the help. And again, this is another thing that Brené Brown said as well. The problem with people who are always take up the role of the helper is that if you're not able to receive the help from others, if you're not able to ask for help when you need it, then really you do think that you're better than everybody else. Then really there is another kind of kick that you get from helping others. And I remember that when I heard that, I was like, oh, okay. I remember reading in her book, I was like, I feel dragged. So at that point, I remember it wasn't just the work that I had to do, the tiredness, the fatigue. It was also the emotional work that I was doing on the side, I want to say, but it was all kind of integrated. So I had to really reflect, okay, so I need to be able to reach this goal, which is submitting my thesis. I know that's going to be difficult. What do I need to put in place for me to be able to reach that goal? Because otherwise I won't be able, if I continue in this way, I'm not going to be able to do it. I will lose it. I'm somebody who loves her sleep, so I wasn't able to sleep. That's my body telling me something. Mm-hmm. I love food. I had no appetite. And I remember clearly having a moment thinking, oh, that's weird. Anybody who knows me knows that I love food. I was like, oh, that's weird. There's something like even food that I would normally enjoy, I would eat it because I knew that I needed to eat, but I wasn't enjoying it. It didn't bring me any joy, any pleasure. So I was like, okay, something is wrong and I need to do something about it. So that's what it looked like for me. So it really required some mindfulness, just to recognize the kind of symptoms of the signs. So the continuous fatigue, not being able to sleep, not being able to enjoy the little pleasure that I used to enjoy, not wanting to connect with loved ones. Beside the very minimum, yes, you call your parents, you call your brother, it really kept it to the minimum. So that's when I realized, okay, something needs to be changed because I can't lead, continue in this way.
Yeah, both of you mentioned some great points. Identifying it, like Ruthie mentioned, you just went home and wrapped up in your gabi just enough to recharge, and Mikal, losing those interests like the food and sleeping. And they seem minor sometimes. You're just like, oh, it's just one thing, but it can really add up over time. And also the pressure of family, saying, not really, even if they don't put it on you, just the idea, okay, my parents brought me all over here and I have to achieve in the workplace. So I think those can lead to burnout. And thank you for sharing on how you were able to identify the burnout feelings, which pretty much leads us to our next question. Burnout is not just in the workplace, it's also within our home, our family, and the economy. So, and you did share a bit of how you were dealing with burnout, but can you share, and both of you elaborate more on how to combat burnout once you do get it, once you identify it, what's the best way to deal with it and heal from the feeling of burnout?
So I think now with my experience, like this is, you know, 4 or 5 years, I'm not the same person. I don't live in the same way. A lot of things have changed for me, right? So I see it in like two parts. So one is like prevention, like lifestyle, like how do you live, how just in general, you know, how do you eat, how do you sleep, physical exercise, how do you take care of your mental health as a preventative measure, as part of your lifestyle, right? So that's like one part. And the other part is like, if you're in it, if you're experiencing burnout right now, what do you need to do to get yourself out of it? So let's start with the prevention, because I think maybe that's like the low hanging fruit, which is like, I think all of us should be engaging in, you know, we should think about the types of foods that we eat. Are we eating, you know, for our emotions, or are we eating to actually fuel our bodies? To just think about what's in a lot of modern foods are like filled with like chemicals, hormones, all of this stuff. Just make sure that we're eating like wholesome. And the other one is enough sleep. Like Mickey said, the sleep is very, very important. 7 to 8 hours sleep is recommended, you know, for us to really function well. Physical exercise in any shape or form, walking, strength training, yoga, you know, cycling, whatever your jam is, it's really important for us to get into our bodies. So that is really, really important. And then another prevention, I think, is also relationships, you know, and that could be in any shape or form, but relationships where we can be vulnerable and honest and like talk. And for some people, that's like in a confidential relationship, maybe with a therapist. And for some people, it's with a faith leader in their community, or with a friend or a sister or a brother or whatever. But like, it's just important, because I remember when I was going through my burnout, I was that typical kind of like what Mickey said, the typical self-reliant Eritrean. I was just like, I can do this. Like, I don't need anybody. I'm not going to talk to anybody about it. It's just, my parents went through worse. I'm self-reliant. I'm going to do this. But the reality is, like, we are interdependent. We're wired for interdependency. We need each other. And I had to do a lot of work to get over my own vulnerability, to be able to open myself up to other people. And even like EriWellBeing was part of that. I've said some things on EriWellBeing about my mental health that I haven't talked to my loved ones about, you know? So I think just staying open to sharing, inviting other people in to your journey, or whatever you're experiencing, is part of also the prevention. And that's a couple of things, see what Mikal will want to add to that. But in general, we need to build a lifestyle that is focused on well-being. And it's not a point, I don't think it's like a point that we arrive to. Now I've arrived, now I'm well. It's something that you continuously work on. Like, you know, we live a lot longer today than the previous generations of you know, in our families. So just to think about, we're going to need ourselves for a long period of time. So how can we incorporate more like more well-being into our lifestyles across these aspects? And I think if you're in it, if you're really in and experiencing burnout, seek help. It's so, so important. Don't go through it alone. There's so many resources today. You can call like confidential, like phone lines, like national helplines. Like, everybody's comfort level is different. Some people, you know, don't feel comfortable speaking to another Eritrean maybe about their mental health. They might feel that stigma gets activated. Whatever it is, there is an outlet, or there is a context in which you can seek help, you know, that makes you feel comfortable. But it's so, so important. And the other thing I would say, if you're in it and you're currently experiencing burnout, you really need to take care of yourself more. You really need to like do more self-care, whatever that is. Like, take nice long showers, light some candles, journal, aromatherapy, drop a few oils of like some nice aromatherapy oils in a glass of hot water, and let that infuse your house. Like, anything that will calm down your nervous system. It's like, you need soothing, you know? And I think that's why I went home and I was like, for me, there's nothing more soothing than a gabi. It's like, it's so cultural. It reminds me of so many things. Like, and I think that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to soothe myself, you know? So I think it's really important to find ways to like soothe yourself and to increase like positive feelings, and that so you can feel safe. But on the other hand, you need to get yourself out of that situation as well, when you're going to need help, you know? And so reach out to somebody. And the third thing I would say also, if you're in it, physical activity, activate your body. I know it feels counterintuitive. I'm exhausted. I don't want to exercise, but really, you really need to get into your body to be able to generate like more energy. That's really important.
I mean, you mentioned really great points. I think if I were to add to the prevention part, I would say create a toolbox and that can be anything that generally brings you joy. If you know that going to the restaurant because I love food, or to go to the spa, or go to the bookshop, or life event. These are the things, I mean, before COVID, we'll see what happens afterwards. But if these are the things that normally bring you joy, have a clear understanding of, like, write them down, have them clear in your mind. And if you foresee that you have a period, I don't know, in the next 2 months will be super busy, I don't want to end up in that space anymore, what can I do to help myself? I mean, one of the things is boundaries, which we will talk about like right after this. But the other thing is make some time in the middle, in some space, to rest. Rest can be, that's what I did today, and I feel like a different person. But rest, it can be such a revolutionary act of self-care. And something as saying, okay, this day I'm going to have a self-care day that is only for myself, and I'm not going to feel guilty about it, even though I know that I have deadlines and pressures the following Monday. So it's being intentional on how you rest, being intentional on the activities that bring you joy. If it's seeing a certain friend or a certain family member brings you peace, then that's what you plan in that time. And again, it can sound counteractive, but it's just how you feel energized from loving connections and, authentic connections. And I think this is one of the biggest lessons I've learned from my experience of burnout, to have those tools in place beforehand so that you can plan your time. And another thing that I did was also to re-energize my body also with vitamins and supplements. So I guess that is kind of related to the nutrition aspect that Ruthie already talked about. But just, for example, if you're going towards winter, you want to recharge on your vitamin C. The echinacea, it's really good for your immune system. The ginger and honey are really good anti-inflammatory, resources. So just be intentional of how you incorporate those vitamins, those supplements, those healthy and rich nutrients, then they will keep you going, that at least are not bringing you down. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have a glass of wine. If my self-care is Netflix and chill in my sofa, I'm gonna have my popcorns and I might have my wine, and that's okay. So it's finding the balance, but plan those moments of rest, those moments of joy in the times that you think you need it the most. And then when you're in it, besides obviously looking for professional help, reaching out to your support, is allow yourself to lower the pressure that you have on yourself. Sometimes those pressures are self-inflicted. Nobody's expecting all of these things all the time. They don't know what's going on in your life, and we feel so almost compelled to do this thing, no matter how we feel, no matter what our body's telling us, no matter what's going on in our personal life. And it's just a bit of kindness towards ourselves. So saying, okay, I'm not able to meet this deadline. I will just have to email this person and let that person know. And I'm really sorry, I'm struggling at the moment. Is there any chance that we can reschedule this in 1 week, in 2 weeks? And that's okay, knowing that everybody's going through this as well. Because sometimes we feel like we are the only one going through it. And there's so much shame that, revolves around not stating what you need. And I think the more we realize that everybody is struggling, just assume that everybody is struggling with something. And then you can be that person to almost give others permission to take it slow. yeah, so this is what I have to say.
Thank you.
I just want to add one thing to that, is like, to all of what we're saying also, is like, if how to prevent burnout is to pay attention to yourself. A lot of us are not paying attention to ourselves. We're out there, we're on social media, we're, you know, watching what everybody else is expecting from us, families, you know, all of this stuff. But pay attention to yourself and drop down into your body. What are you feeling? What are you experiencing in your body? Like, are you in a relationship with yourself? That's a very, very important question. So by paying attention, we can start, you know, maybe catching these things like before it gets too serious.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. And I'm so glad you really emphasized the importance of taking those preventative measures, because oftentimes we think we're okay until we're going and crash. And, you know, sometimes that healing part can be difficult too. So the most important part of it is taking those preventative measures, self-care. And a part of that is also creating that boundary, right? And so will you explain how lack of boundaries can even lead to burnout? And how we can better set boundaries for ourselves.
Do you want to start on that one, Nikki?
Sure. How can boundaries be part of it? When you just say yes. You say yes to everything. You're not listening to your body. You're not listening to your spirit. Because sometimes, you know, you have not only you have very physical reaction to, you know, when you don't want, when you don't have the capacity to do something, like you will have signs like your stomach hurts, your back hurts, you're not sleeping well, like you receive an email and just seeing who sends the email is giving you some level of anxiety. These are all intuitive reaction that we have for a reason. But despite all those signals, we say, yes, I can do it. Yes, yes, I can do this one more thing. So, and I think it had also, I mean, from an anthropological perspective, our culture, particularly for women, but I want to say it, but possibly for men as well, we come from a culture where you don't make excuses. You just, you know, there's this power of the sacrifice. So the more you sacrifice, the stronger you are, you know, the more you're able to help your community. And this is something that we need to let go as a concept, because really, what's the point? What's the point if, you know, if then we end up having a heart disease, diabetes, and we have a mental health breakdown and divorce. All of these things are happening. And yet we are here trying to be this strong person who doesn't need anything and we are fine. So boundaries can be difficult to set up, especially if you didn't have them before. And even more so to keep them, to maintain them, particularly with friends and family, with people that your close network, because now they're used to you behaving in a certain way, and all of a sudden you're creating a space for yourself. So it's normal for us to experience some resistance, but the benefits that we will enjoy because of that are you can't measure them, because you're basically playing with your well-being. So the moment that you ever say, you know what, I don't have the capacity for this, I had to reject the publication because I couldn't bring myself to write. And every day, just the idea that I had to, you know, work on this project will give me a level of anxiety that I don't want to leave the bed. So the moment that I send the email to say, I'm sorry, I'm struggling at the moment, I still have to submit my thesis, so I'm gonna have to say no. And what I received on the other side was understanding. So sometimes we're just so fearful that people are gonna judge us, that people are gonna think that we're incompetent, that we don't know what we're doing, that we're not smart enough, not good enough, you name it. But that's not the case. And actually, when you put these boundaries in place, you're also allowing others to follow your lead and being able to take care of themselves. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. Ruthie, did you want to add anything to that?
I think Miki said, a lot of great things on that question. I think when it comes to boundaries, I just want to the context for us as Eritreans on this conversation is that we come from a context where boundaries as a concept isn't really necessarily so promoted. I think that's very important as well, because we come from a group context. We're a collective. Eritrea is a fruit of a collective effort, collective labor, collective sacrifice. And I've known, and again, my own experience, trying to set boundaries with my parents, and that's been very difficult, as I was becoming an adult, because they're but Gualnaichi, you're our daughter. What do you mean? And it's but I'm hey, I'm being raised in this individualistic society where there are other expectations on me. So I think just think about that, because I think a lot of us struggle with setting boundaries because there is that navigating two cultures with two very different views on boundaries. I also think that in my work, I am a recovering people pleaser, and it's a huge pattern that I have within me. I feel a lot of guilt, and that quote that you shared from Brene Brown of helping others, but not receiving help in return. I felt dragged too, because that's me. I'm super strong. I can help everybody. I don't need anybody to help me. But and just realizing that, no, actually, for it to be genuine, it has to be mutual, right? And I just kind of a message to us is I think especially a lot of females within our culture, but potentially just in all genders, but is that we are raised almost to be pleasers. We are raised to be pleasers. So it's and you take yourself everywhere you go, So that pleaser mentality, whether it's you're the daughter in the household, or women are expected to do this, or, all of that stuff, you take it with you into your romantic relationships, into your career, where maybe you end up just doing too much all the time and trying to please, but you're not necessarily clear on what it is that you want or what you need. So I think it's also important to try to reflect on boundaries with our cultural heritage and maybe the roles that we play in our family, because and to give a practical example, I was a massive people pleaser at home growing up, and I've become a people pleaser in a lot of my friendships, romantic relationships also, and also at work, but it's not always so obvious. I wouldn't say oh, I'm a pushover, absolutely not, but I'm very firm at work, but however, I will do too much. I will sacrifice my own well-being to over deliver and help people with their projects, or, okay, we need cake on Friday, I'll buy it. Constantly being that person that puts in extra, but understanding that you're giving your life energy away and maybe you need to be giving that to yourself, So being boundaried is very connected to our cultural heritage and our beliefs and our ideas. So be gentle with yourself in the process if you're starting to examine your own boundaries, and understand that it is connected to where you come from as well. And that also needs to be examined and looked at and be okay, which parts of this do I want to take with me and which parts do I want to leave behind,
Yeah. No, and that's very important, because we are living in an individualistic society, but grew up in a collectivistic, that culture. And so when you're meshing that together, it can become overwhelming. And so in the workplace, setting boundaries can look different. In the home, it can look different. And you've touched on it a little bit, but do you mind just giving some advice on how our audience, even myself, can set boundaries in the workplace and also at home, and how that can look, I guess, different in a sense, but at the same time, very similar? How can we set those boundaries in those two settings? Am I clear in the question? You want me to elaborate a little more?
No, that's good. Can I go, Miki? Something just.
Yeah, you go.
So if you're a people pleaser, which I think a lot of us are, Eritreans in general, or especially women, a lot of us are people pleasers. Practice saying no just for the sake of saying no. That's the cheat code. I think that's super important with boundaries, is that sometimes just say no To the little things, just practice, because if you've said yes your whole life, there's a certain way that your body responds. You feel good, right? But if you say no, you'll probably have a negative, something like, you'll feel tension in your body. So just practice like saying no, and pay attention to when, because it's like we teach other people how to treat us, right? So sometimes you might even need to set boundaries like with yourself, you know? And what Mikal said about having the toolbox, maybe it's like you write down certain scenarios where you feel that you overextend yourself. I say yes without checking my calendar. I say yes, but then I feel frustrated. I say yes, but I don't really want to do it. I said yes to do this because I felt like I had to. And like write down the scenarios where this happens, and maybe like you can keep it on your notes in your phone and just like check with yourself. Or like one thing I did with one of my coaching clients actually was that to have a physical calendar, for instance, but not carry that calendar with you all the time. So that means that if somebody asks you to do something, maybe you'll say, let me check. I'm going to check my calendar and I'll get back to you tomorrow. So you build in some like margins and buffers so you don't have to commit on the spot. But in general, I think it's about slowing down. Setting boundaries is about slowing down. So let's say somebody asks you to do something at work. Instead of saying, yes, I'll do it, and be like, can I think about that? I'll get back to you. And just by slowing it down, you're giving yourself a moment to think about it. You're giving yourself a moment to like actually be like, do I have the capacity? You might still say yes, but at least you're like starting to engage with like pumping the brakes a little bit and being like, do I have capacity? Is this going to mean that if I say yes to this person, private, professional, whatever it is this going to mean that I'm going to be sacrificing something that I should be doing for myself, or that I need to be doing for myself? So always remember that you're like, when you're overextending, you're taking from yourself and giving yourself, you're not giving to, you're taking from yourself and giving it to somebody else. Sometimes that's appropriate and sometimes that's not appropriate. But if you struggle with that, just like slow down that process. And remember, this was a huge thing for me, is that often we let other people like emotionally blackmail us and be like, oh, but you know, it's so great. I love when you help me with this. Or I don't know anybody who can help me with this the way that you do. You're so great and you're always so helpful. And then, but we do it to ourselves as well. We emotionally blackmail ourselves. And I've noticed with myself a belief that I've held within that. It's like, you have to trust that people have the capacity to solve their own problems, you know? And when you're like not boundaried, it's almost like, I want to help you, I want to do this for you, but we're also saying like, oh, I don't think you can do it, like I'm going to help you do this. Or just notice like the motivation, like why are you doing it? Or you doing it because you want to feel good, but maybe you need to step into your life and find other ways to make yourself feel good, like step into the power of your own life, as opposed to just getting this like good feeling from like helping others. So I think we just need to see each other as whole individual beings. And if it's like, for instance, at work, it can be a bit harder depending on who your boss is and where you work and the type of work that you do. But maybe there's a potential just to slow it down before you say yes, to start a conscious process of like, even for some people, it might be like, can I get back to you tomorrow? And for some people, depending on the work you do, it might be, oh, can I get back to you in 5 minutes? But just that 5 minutes is you acknowledging yourself, your own capacity, and your loyalty to yourself, to be like, let me check in with myself before I overextend, overfunction, overcommit.
That's wonderful advice. And Mikal, did you want to add to that?
I mean, I'm thinking, so within the workplace, as Ruthie said, some of us may, depending on your role and what position, how your environment, kind of setting boundaries can look different. But what has worked for me, for instance, in my journey was to speak to colleagues that are trusted. And by speaking to colleagues, and I don't mean that I say, oh, so-and-so did this to me, but in terms of workload, for instance, is this a normal workload? Like people that you trust, it's like, okay, what does your workload look like? What do you do? How are you doing it? Because you seem like you seem more balanced. right? So have a look around you also, for example, and see what strategies maybe people that you trust in your workplace have to kind of set those boundaries in the workplace. And I think one of the most difficult things for us as children of immigrants is that we almost always feel the privilege of even being in those spaces. So of course I need to work hard, of course I need to do all of these things, I need to be super helpful because this is what my mom would tell me to do. You know, like, be grateful for even being in that space. That's enough. And not set those boundaries and, okay, I need to book my holidays, or I need this time off, I can't work this weekend, I can't do overtime, and not then, you know, spending your time off overthinking what your boss might think about you saying no to overtime. You know, it's I think, well, even what Ruthie said, it has to become a practice. You start from the small thing, and then you increase as you go along, as as you build your confidence. And another thing, I guess more on the home side, on the family, which in some ways can also be, I don't know if it's more difficult, but definitely tricky, because obviously these are people that you care about, that you love, and you don't want to disappoint. That's the problem. So especially if you're like me, as a child, has always been following the rules and always had the role of the good girl, a good daughter, and all of those things, then to disappoint can be one of your biggest fear, because then you're unworthy, right? They obviously, people appreciate me because I'm doing all of those things. So it's hard for me to say no, because then, you know, maybe they won't love me anymore. They won't appreciate me anymore. Maybe they won't care what I do anymore. So again, practice from the small things. But I think what I've learned as well was to be mindful about your body experience, about when you say yes and when you say no. When I said no, for example, to the article, it felt so good. Like, in theory, I should have been frightened because, like, you know, I need to have publication. I'm an academic. But it was the right thing to do. And the moment that I sent that email, I felt great about it. And I was able to rest, and I was able to really, you know, recuperate and focus on submitting my thesis. When you say yes to something that you don't want to, your body again will tell you. And it's just the anxiety, it's the way you breathe, it's the way your whole body becomes stiff. Yeah. It's just you have a full body experience, but you need to be mindful. You need to be able to recognize. You need to slow those signs. You need to be able to slow down to recognize that. And I think what the pandemic has done for us is that everything has slowed down so much that there are all these signs, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's the family, whether it's our health, that we can't ignore anymore, because you're just here. Like, before, we were just running around like headless chickens, and all of a sudden we just need to stay at home. So we have to face the things that we didn't want to face before. And I think this is another reason why we are struggling so much during this pandemic.
Mika, great point on that. Even saying no to the article, there's power in saying no. And but of course, for us culturally, that can be difficult, right? So how can we start up that conversation to our parents about boundaries and communicate that effectively? Because I know I will struggle with that. Like I said, we always want to be the best of the best to our family, to our parents. So how do we communicate that?
So I feel like I have a lot to say on this topic and a lot of like personal experience, but I think I want to be really real about it, because it's rare that we're in these like settings with each other, you know, Eritreans, where we can speak to this experience very directly. And it's like the foundation is like, by speaking about this, we're not dishonoring our parents, we're not disrespecting them, we're just being honest about our experiences. I love my parents, but they were very strict growing up, you know, and I had to really fight a lot for like my freedom, and they were like very high expectations on me. And it got to a point where, you know, even as an adult, like, so I'm saying like even past the age of 25, where they were still like imposing a lot of things on me, you know? And I think that's partially what led to like my burnout. But for them, they're seeing it as like, but we just want you to do better in life. We just want you to not stop striving. And it's, you know, tough love and all this stuff. And as much as we love them, I also want to be honest about it's hard to be on the receiving end of that, you know, that tough love and not receiving the softness as much, or just always having to read between the lines on that they love me, but and maybe like wanting a different direction for your life, you know, than what they wish for you, or maybe wanting to just like, I want to figure out my own way. I don't want somebody to decide what my way is. I'm capable to figure out my own way. And that's always been like a big clash between me and my parents. So I think it's really, really important to, you can spend, depending on who your parents are, but I'm going to generalize here as like my experience with like working with a lot of Eritreans is like, you can spend time trying to like talk to them about your boundaries, or you can just get on with setting your boundaries, as in showing. And I think showing, putting into practice is a lot easier, because conceptually, in, you know, to most Eritreans, my parents still say this, like, you're supposed to do this. And I'm like, no, it's a choice. And for them, they don't see it that way. So it's like, you can argue, but it's like fundamentally understanding that you come from two different perspectives. What has been more effective for me is just getting on with my boundaries. So not visiting them out of guilt, but visiting when I have capacity. Not calling them out of guilt, but calling when I have time and I actually want to talk to them, you know? And there's been, I mean, there's so many other things. Like I've made major life decisions based on not wanting my parents to be upset with me. And I regret that now in hindsight, but it was a good teacher. So the reality is that I think you can talk yourself until you're like blue in the face about I want to do this and you should respect me like this, or accept this part about me, or I want this and all this. And, or you can just be like, I'm doing this, you know? And for me, it's been a lot more effective actually. And it's something that my coach taught me. It's like, you can like talk about it, or you can just demonstrate it, show it. And people actually learn in a much more effective way. And they start seeing you and respecting you more as an adult when you're actually showing them instead of just like talking, right? And just understanding that fundamentally, it's not because they're trying to like cramp your style or they're mean, or it's just like they come from a completely different set of beliefs. But as an adult, you have to take responsibility for yourself. So we all do, and understand that actually our beliefs are going to be a mix maybe between some of that and some of the stuff that we learn here. And it's like, it's not going to mimic their beliefs. And kind of making that change or walking down your own path is not going to be comfortable all the time, right? So just expect like that it's going to be uncomfortable. And I think the importance of showing your boundaries versus trying to tell them and get them to get on board and validate and accept and please mom, like tell me that you'll be okay if I do this, is that just pay attention to, are you engaging with them as the child, or are you engaging with them as an adult? And that for me was like huge, because when somebody asked me that question and I was like, oh, I am like literally behaving like a 5-year-old in these conversations with my parents. And when I switched that and I was like, you, at the time, I was like, you're a 30-something woman, like you need to engage like that woman. And that just shifted a lot of things. And it just created a different type of energy. But I would have never gotten there with my parents unless I was okay with being uncomfortable. And just to be really transparent and really honest, that even included a period of a couple of months where I couldn't talk to my parents. I was just like, I'm not going to talk to you guys. I need some space. And I would talk to my brothers, and my brothers would let them know that I was okay. Because we needed that break of being like, things are not going to continue the way that they have. I've changed. Our relationship needs to change. And we just needed that. And for some people, that's what you need. And for others, maybe you're able to do it without that kind of a period. But I want to be really honest and transparent, because I know a lot of us really struggle with this, and we struggle with like giving ourselves permission to carve out space and to be able to create an adult relationship with our parents. But the reality is they're not going to be here forever. And we are, you know, ultimately responsible for our own lives. And the sooner we get to a psychological adulthood, the better our lives are going to be. You know, we're not here to be a function of our parents or to fulfill like their unlived dreams, or I don't know, transmute their pain of based on what they've gone through. And trust me, like, I love my parents. I have so much like love and empathy and respect for them, but I also want to live a full and like a healthy life. And just to like kind of pull all of that together, we had periods that were really uncomfortable. We didn't understand each other, all of that stuff. But today I have a much better relationship with my parents, and it's like a lot more boundaries. So that discomfort, that rocking the boat, it was worth it, because now I think they see me as an adult. They still have like, you know, they're still salty because they're Habesha parents, right? And they still have opinions about my life, but there's a boundary that they don't cross anymore, because I've told them that, you know, we've worked on that. I don't know, Miki, what your experience has been.
I mean, I must say that there is a different experience in, you know, setting boundaries with your parents when you live in the same city to when you live in different country. Because, I mean, the benefit, quote unquote, from living in a different country is that you have your independence. And that's how I felt. I mean, I moved to London when I was 19, and I'm now 33. So I've lived all my life, not my adult life here, and I having, you know, adult to adult as a verb, which is still kind of in progress. So what I realized is that, you know, I've grown to become this woman. So obviously I have my boundaries and so on. But when I go back to visit, particularly with my mom, because I have a closer relationship to my mom, those boundaries become very fluid, and, you know, and I can see it because of my bodily experience. So I feel that something irritates me, but just let it pass. It's okay. I'm only here for 2 weeks. I'm not going to have those discussions over this. But I think what Ruthie mentioned is very important, that the on the other side of this process of being uncomfortable, it's a much better relationship that you can have with your parents, where you are actually an adult and you know, to some extent to them, but like you have this kind of honest conversation with your parents. Now, the tip will be similar to what we said before. Start from the small doses, start from the small things and saying no to things. And you basically what you're doing with that is you're slowly helping them change their behavior. You might not telling them like what you're doing, that you're setting boundaries, that you need your space, that this is your decision, but you're just telling them what decision you already made. And slowly they will start to expect that you're already making decision, and then they will ask and say, okay, so what did you decide to do on this thing? Oh, how did you do that on this other thing? As opposed to telling you what to do and expecting you to do it no matter what, like, no matter the distance. So I would say, I mean, everything that Ruthie said, and just adding that start by the small things and get into that practice. And, you know, sometimes it will be easier and other times will be more difficult depending on the topic that you're discussing. But trust your judgment, trust yourself, you know, and even if you do make a mistake, that's okay. We're allowed to make mistakes, because we also have this fear of failure, this fear of disappointing that kind of paralyze us from making those decisions. So try it, and then if you do make mistakes, that's okay, because you're learning. Every time we make mistakes, we learn. So that would be my advice.
I know I was taking a whole lot in as both of you are sharing this, because boundaries are so important. And Mikal, you just said about the fear of like displeasing and failure, and going back to what Ruthie was saying, when you're having that boundary issue, when you were fixing that boundary issue with your parents, right? Going into that childlike mode and having to separate that. I mean, I think that's so important. And we do, even as a 32-year-old, when I'm having a conversation with my parents, usually it's like asking for permission because of that fear of displeasing or fear of failure. And I would love to go on about this because I know personally I can take some more. So maybe after this we can continue the conversation. But for the sake of time, thank you for sharing that important piece. And I think it can resonate with so many Eritreans and with our audience about setting boundaries with our culture. And that's going to just open up so many doors for us because we don't want to regret things, right? Like regret of not taking those opportunities because of fear of what our family will say. And I love what you said about just doing it in action, not really like asking for that permission, just go ahead and do it and showing it rather than telling them. And that's different. I think that's the language we speak almost, right? It's more action oriented rather than, all right, let's vocalize this emotion and discuss and communicate. Culturally, I don't think that's how we operate. So thank you so much for sharing that important piece. And so we'll open up the space for questions from our audience, if that's okay. Let's see. All right, any questions from our wonderful audience? Because I can go on and on about this. Let's see, make sure for my question. All right. I have a question. All right, I have a question from Gannett. She'll be on video shortly.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for such a great, insightful conversation. My question is, how do you deal with people, whether it be like professionally or personally, who repeatedly kind of violate the boundaries you set? And, you know, sometimes those are hard conversations, but at what point do you kind of end those relationships, or how do you navigate those difficult conversations? Thank you.
That's such a great question. And I guess, you know, it depends on like the nature of the situation, whether it's professional or private. But I think it's important to just like check in with yourself and with your own integrity, and also like how it makes you feel. You know, how does it make you feel when you say no, or I can't, I don't want to, this is not a good time, I have too much on, I don't like it, whatever it is, and the person keeps on insisting. I must say that for me, now that I'm much more in tune, because I feel like for a large part of my life, for a long part of my life, I was kind of living outside of myself because I was in this people pleaser mode and not really in connection with myself. And now that I am much more in tune and embodied with myself, I find that even the simplest thing, if somebody says, do you want to come out tonight? And I say, you know what, no, I'm really tired, I don't want to. And they insist. It almost feels like a violation now, because I'm like, but I know what I want. Like I said, I don't want to. And I understand that sometimes people, you know, they might be stressed at work and they ask you to do more, they want you to help or whatever it is. And sometimes people have bad intent, you know. So in any situation though, I generally feel that I'm so clear on myself and my capacity today that when I say yes or no, it's coming from a place of truth. So why is my truth not accepted? And so I think that it just depends on where you are in your journey. But for me, I can just say it feels like a violation, like I'm not respected. Like I'm telling you that I can't, or I don't want to, or whatever it is. But I think it's, again, goes back to that practice of what both Mikal and I reiterated about. It sounds like maybe in that setting, it would be hard for you to kind of affirm yourself, and maybe find other areas in your life where you can just start saying no, practicing saying no small scale, so that your nervous system, your body gets attuned to you saying no, right? And so that when these situations, these bigger situations come up, and for instance, with the manager or whatever it is, that you feel that you can say no. But again, it's important to say no, not from a place of like defiance, but to say no from being genuinely in tune with yourself and your needs. I'd love to help, but I'm kind of overwhelmed right now and I need to deliver on these projects. Can we revisit this next week? So be an adult in the way that you also say no. you know, or in a relationship with a romantic partner or a parent, and say, you know what, I am overwhelmed right now. I'm really stressed. Can we talk about this in a week? Or like, I can't do this right now, but in the future, I'd love to help. Right now, I can't. Like for the next 2 weeks, I'm really busy. Or so to just be like very clear in our communication and feel like it's okay to be clear. You have the right to speak your need. And if you struggle with that, you need to find a way to practice.
Yeah, I think Ruthie mentioned everything. But obviously the key aspect is to be clear on why you're saying no, and if that's really what you want, or why you want to say yes, and if that's really what you want. But once you had clear why you need to set your boundaries, then I guess the question for yourself is what's at play. So if I let this slide one more time, if this happens again and again, what's at play here? Is it my health? Is it my emotional well-being? Do I feel safe? Is this really how I want to live? Is this like this relationship? Is this really the kind of industry or job or organization that I want to be in? These are the kind of real questions. If things don't change, then what action are you going to take to change the situation for yourself? And you know, there'll be times even with friendships where I say, okay, so this person, I've tried to communicate my boundaries, and all I received was just grief. You know, okay, so what am I going to do? I know that I love this person, but does that mean that that I have to continue to, you know, receive this? Or what is it going to change? What do I need to do for myself? And that can look like just taking some space, taking time off, just like what Ruthie said. Maybe it doesn't mean that you have to cut the person completely, but just understanding that you're not on the same wavelength, that you're not being received, that your truth is not being received, and what's at play is really your well-being, and it's not worth it. Because that's key. Because once you have it clear how you're feeling about a certain situation, and you know, that person refuses to receive your truth, then it's up to you to find a way to navigate that helps you kind of protect your energy, protect your well-being, and the strategy will be different if it's a friendly relationship, it's family, or a workplace. Maybe, you know, you need to pay your bills, so you're not going to be able, I don't accept this. But as Ruthie says, that it might look like looking for other jobs, looking for other departments within that company, looking for maybe a colleague who can support you of the project, as opposed to being the only person working on that particular project. Yeah, so be mindful about your boundaries, but then also be prepared to take action if they're not being respected. That would be the short answer.
And just to add to that is that I loved everything that you said, Mikal. And I was just thinking about when we're not setting boundaries, we're usually fearful of setting boundaries. Like we're scared. He might leave me, she might leave me, I might lose my job, or they might dislike me, or whatever it is. And again, we're saying like, say no in a respectful, compassionate, empathetic way as an adult, right? There's a way to say no. But also trust that if you say no and there's an adverse reaction to you, then maybe that's not the environment that you should be in. Because why would somebody say no to, if you say, I don't have the capacity to do this, or I don't want to do this, and if somebody can't accept that, then maybe you should question as to, are you in the right environment? Are you in relationship with the right type of people?
Thank you for sharing that. We also have 2 more questions that just came in. One is, how can you be more in tune with your body?
I think the short answer for me on that one is to slow down. Slowing down has helped me so much to get into my body, because I used to be such a like fast travel, be everywhere all the time, do a million things at the same time, to-do lists on the weekend. And now it's just like slowing down to be able to catch up with your breath, with how you're feeling, and doing things that are like nice for your body, whether that's like go to the sauna. I know like today it might be hard during COVID, but like taking showers, take time when you're like rubbing body lotion on you, or like, I don't know, putting face masks on. There's so many small things that we can do, but I think you need to slow down so that you can start noticing. That's the first step of like getting into your body. So just like generally move slower. So in the morning, for instance, if your morning, like if you usually get out the house in half an hour, and maybe try to wake up so you have an hour in the morning so you can drink your coffee slower. So you have time to gaze outside the window, and just like, how do you feel when you just have more space to be, and you can sense and just like really feel more embodied? So finding different ways to slow down and also relax your body is a good place to start. What do you think, Mickey?
Same. And the short answer is really slow down and be present and do activity. If you're somebody who struggles usually to slow down, maybe find activities that they will help you do that. And that can be a puzzle, that can be cooking or baking, that can be reading a book, going for a walk, all of these things that forces you to physically slow down or mentally slow down, and then which then allows you to really feel how you getting more in tune with your body. I remember there was like an example when I was doing my PhD where I could feel that my breathing was very shallow. And I was wondering, but there's nothing wrong. Like I'm sitting in my desk, I'm not tired. And I was really, and it was getting me agitated as I was meant to write. And in that moment, I had a very physical reaction to mental exhaustion. And I realized, okay, I need to go for a walk. And I just closed everything, left everything there, and went for a walk to the park and just sat there. And I left my phone like at my desk. I didn't take it with me. I just wanted to take a break, have a walk, have some fresh air, and really breathe in and exhale and really focus on my breathing. And I felt better. And I did that for like 10, 15 minutes and went back to the desk. Now, it's really intertwined with mindfulness, to be in tune with your body. The more mindful you try to be, then you're more in tune with your body you will be. And you're just paying more attention to things that happen in your body than otherwise you wouldn't be able to, because you're just thinking about a million things at the time and a million projects at the time.
Yeah, listen to our bodies. You know, sometimes we neglect it during stressful times. So definitely, thank you for sharing that. Our next question is, how long did it take to find balance between the complex duality of loving your parents and culture fiercely while also rejecting, the toxicity that comes from it due to generational trauma?
So for me, it took a couple of years because I really came like head to head with my parents in connection with, I understood that my burnout was very much so tied to all of that stuff that I was holding on to through family, and I had to go to therapy. And actually my mom joined me in therapy, one of my siblings joined me in therapy for a bit. We really had a lot of stuff that we just really need to unpack, because I was just like, look, my body is telling me this stuff, I can't operate like this anymore, things need to change. But there was so much resistance initially. And I think this is such a good question, because most of us feel like when we talk about our family stuff that we're selling our parents out, that it's like, you know, we shouldn't. But I really believe the reason why I do is because I believe that the people that I attract into my experience are adults who understand that there's like a huge fundamental love that I have for my culture and my family. I'm not hanging my parents out, but we need to be able to talk about these things, because otherwise we won't heal, you know? And a lot of people are walking around with like really incomplete or unsatisfactory relationships or very toxic relationships with their parents. And it could get better. But the reality is that before it gets better, sometimes it needs to get worse. You know, sometimes you just need to look at the thing and be like, this shit is not working, you know? And for me, so to answer that question, it took like 4 or 5 years. And in some, you know, like we had shouting match, we had periods when we were not talking. And it was exactly that. Like, I think one of the things that Mikal and I have in common outside of, like, we have many things in common outside of community engagement, is also like a very fierce love for our culture, for our country, for our parents' experience. We're empaths, we get them, we can read into what their experience has been like, but that doesn't mean that I need to like set myself on fire to keep them warm. It doesn't mean that I have to self-sacrifice to the point of understanding their experience, that I sacrifice my own experience now, which is meant to be a progression, you know, of whatever life experiences they've had. So I would say be patient. It takes time. You're going to have ups and downs, especially if you're really like going into the situation like, I'm not asking for your permission, I'm seizing permission. I am becoming an adult. Are you going to come with me or not on this journey? And it's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to get a lot of pushback and all that stuff. But in terms of how you reconcile the toxicity for like the love that you have for the individuals and the culture, I think for me, it's just boiled down, and it's ongoing. And honestly, I think like being a child of immigrants and constantly living between two cultures and seeing value in both of them, you know, it's like for our parents, they have one identity. They're Eritrean, they're clear. Doesn't matter that my parents have lived in Europe for 40 years and like they lived in Eritrea for maybe like 20. They are Eritreans. There's no conflict around their identity. For us, there is. We're Westerners on the one hand, and on the one hand, we're Eritreans. And then we're also Black, and then we're also women, and all this stuff. So we have to negate so many different things. And I think it's like maybe understanding that this is always on some level going to be active for us, you know, that we're never truly going to feel like completely comfortable like in one identity, that we're always going to have to like shape shift a little bit. But within that, to understand that you had the right to pick the things that work for you and leave behind the things that don't work for you. And I'll give you an example, just because I love like practical examples. It's like in my family, my mom will always say, you should fix all the problems in the family. You're the one. The girl is the glue. You're the one that should bring us together. If there's an issue, you need to sacrifice your time. And she didn't say it that way, but that's what she means. It's like, yeah, you need to fix this. Why? Because you're the girl. Why? Because that's what we do in our culture. I have my own life. Why don't you talk to my brother? Why don't you talk to my other brother? Why am I extra burdened because you come from this patriarchal society that says that women should self-sacrifice to this degree? Oh, well, that's the way it is. Well, that's not the way it is for me. That doesn't work for me. So I'm not going to do that. So it's like you get to choose, but then you also have to be okay with dealing with the discomfort that comes from that, because you're like creating a new pattern for yourself. And by choosing to say, no, I don't agree with that, you're not saying, I don't love you, I'm not going to support you, I don't care for you. You're saying, yeah, absolutely, I'm just going to engage on my terms. And so you get to pick the things that make sense for you, and like with compassion, leave behind the things that like don't work for you and don't make sense for you. That's how I kind of navigate the toxicity from our culture while picking out the things that I think are really awesome. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, for me, two things. On one side, I think this is going to be an ongoing journey. I don't think we'll ever, I mean, I don't foresee a situation where we can say, okay, now we're done. Now we're good on all the boundaries and we have an amazing relationship, because we are changing. We're constantly changing as individuals, and so are our parents. And we go through through life experiences. So the conversation that I have with my mom now are not the same conversation that I had with my mom 5 years ago. So there needs to be some space for growth for all parts involved, and be okay with the notion that this is going to be an ongoing journey, where some conversation, some boundary setting will be easier than others. And once we have that in mind, then we need to decide what's really important, what's really worth, the uncomfortable feeling, the fight that you have to kind of put on with our family to set our boundaries. If you are unclear with the non-negotiable, then you almost prepare yourself for what comes after, which is being uncomfortable, maybe not talking to your parents for a period of time, maybe, so some people even not ever talking to their parents again, because this situation as well is very real. I mean, we do know how the homophobia even that exists in our community. So what happens if I'm gay and I can't tell my parents? And living with my parents is making my life miserable. What happens then? So then you have to make a decision, which is a very difficult decision. Do I tell them and risk not being able to ever have a relationship with my family, or not tell them and live in this lie? And this is something that many in our community, I'm sure, are facing, but not only in our community, other communities as well. So once we have clear what the non-negotiables are, then I think we will find the strength in kind of fighting to keep those boundaries. And also another thing is, sometimes we need to be okay also with our parents never possibly understanding certain things about our lives and the way that we live. Because again, it's not only it is cultural for sure, but also life experience, the education that we had. Certain things our parents will not understand it, and we need to be okay with that. And we need to meet them. I think Dr. Jacob said this all the time. We need to meet them where they are and then take it from there. We can't expect them that you go from nothing to everything. From, slowly kind of create opportunity for you to, have those difficult conversations, so that when you need to have this really big one, they are prepared. It's not going to come out of nowhere. They're not going to panic. They're not going to fear that you are not going to be okay because you're choosing a lifestyle that they don't understand and nobody within the community is following at the moment. So they're not afraid for us anymore because we provided the information over time and we met them where they are. And in some cases, they just don't want to, because you're asking, people in their 60s, 70s, 80s to change their understanding and values that, at a very late stage in life. And so some of the things they may never want to change. And again, it really depends on what's at play. And if it's something really difficult, then find support, and that could be, what is your siblings, who share maybe a similar relationship to your parents. Okay, so what do you do? Can you back me up on this? Can you help me with this? And that can give you extra courage. Or maybe it's talking to a cousin, maybe to an auntie, who's your mom's sister. So that's why, she will be able to have that conversation with your mom as opposed to you having that conversation with your mom. I mean, there are different strategies that we can use, but I guess the key point is that we need to try and kind of make space for our well-being and have that as a priority and be able to fight for it with it. And ideally, our parents will meet us where we are as well. Because at the end of the day, they do love us, even though some certain behaviors and beliefs are really toxic for us. So I don't see that as coming from a place of spite or hate. It's actually coming from a place of love. So with that in mind, Patience, I will say, patience, a lot of it.
We don't need their permission. This is the hardest thing. We want them to be on board, but just understand life is short. We don't need their permission to be who we are, to be who we want to be, but we also need to be compassionate, you know. Like there are different ways that you can bring people along with you on your journey as you're trying. So we really talk about this on EriWellBeing. Don't wait for people to give you permission to take care of your mental health. Take care of it. Don't wait until your mom says it's okay, or somebody in your family is like, yeah, I accept that you do this. Go and take care of yourself. Be an adult, like truly, but be compassionate and stay open to that. A path might open and you can meet somewhere, somehow. It doesn't have to be so like, you have to reject them just because you're carving out your own path. But at the same time, don't sleep on like standing in your power.
Wow. Thank you so much, especially for your transparency and this authentic conversation. I know we're running out of time, but I just want to say thank you for that. And I think having this raw conversation was definitely much needed, and resonate with everyone that's listening. So thank you. And we're recording it, so we'll be able to share this along in the future as well. So I just want to say on behalf of the Eritrean Diaspora Network, thank you so much for taking your time out. I know we're in a different time zone and working with us so you can share your knowledge, advice, and most importantly, thank you for your transparency. And I think that's what made us all connect in this conversation. So I appreciate it so much. And so I said thank you. And thank you for the great work that you're doing. Any way we can support that, we will be more than happy to. So thank you.
Thank you for having us. Really appreciate the opportunity.
All right.
Absolutely. And we love your platform as well. We're a big fan. So it's our pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. And this is a way of coming together. Like you said at the beginning, utilizing, and you guys are the experts right now sharing your journey and what you're doing with EriWellBeing. So thank you. Yeah, have a wonderful afternoon. To our audience, thank you for joining and tuning in.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.